So think about how did you feel when you eat or you ate in that stress state? So maybe it was rushing the kids to school or scoffing some breakfast. Maybe it was eating at your desk and trying to get a million other things done before you could, leave your desk that day. Or maybe it was scoffing dinner that night before you had to get the kids off, maybe to training or to get to the gym or whatever, or maybe a meeting. Think of the last time that you ate like that. Did you get any of the following symptoms? So did you get cramping or heartburn after that meal? Did you have any gas or bloating? Did you have any digestive pain? Did you have reflux? Were you burping for hours after that meal, or even regurgitating some of that food? And if you answered yes to any of those things, then stress could well be affecting your digestion and your metabolism. All right. So I just want to share with you, I think it comes up on the next slide. So I just want to think about what happens to your body in that moment. Okay, so your body says, okay, am I gonna run, or am I going to hang around and fight? Right, as you talked about that fight or flight response. So here's what happens, right? During a stressful situation, your blood pressure goes up, as we spoke about, your heart rate goes up. It's designed to basically create more blood flow, right? And your blood flow is redistributed to your extremities, right? So to your arms and to your legs, really to help you to run away or to put up a good fight. Sorry for that visual. And it's really, think about it, it's directed away from your viscera, right? Away from your stomach, away from your intestines, right? Where where basically you should be digesting, and it's going to redistribute that blood flow to your arms and to your legs, and also to your brain, right? As I said, so you can run away, so you can fight, and so that you can think more clearly. Now, the bottom line is that's a really good thing if you're facing an enemy or a lion or an immediate threat. You want to run away from that lion because that increases your chances of survival, rather than focusing on digesting perhaps those crunchy nut cornflakes that are sitting in your gut, right? But in a situation where you might be running late for school pickup, maybe running towards a deadline, maybe rushing out the door, or that you're going to hit traffic, eating in that stress state means that your digestive system has completely shut down, and it may not return for a couple of hours. So after that episode has passed. So if you've ever had one of those days where you feel like the day is a blur, or you've had no time for yourself, and you can't remember giving yourself time to eat, then it's really important that you take note here. And this is me at times at the moment. This was definitely me when I was working in my very hectic sports nutrition career, when I was working 80 hours a week. I remember eating at my desk in about 2 minutes between appointments, and then I would wonder why I'd be so bloated and uncomfortable, and let's be honest, really gassy by the end of the day and into the next day. So just to be clear, if you eat in a hurry, it doesn't mean that you're going to assimilate or digest that food any faster. In fact, it's the opposite, right? It's going to take much longer because that blood flow has to come back to your gut before it can start digesting and doing the legwork. So even if you ate the healthiest meal on the entire planet, eating in a stress state means that you are going to have reduced digestion. You won't absorb those nutrients in the same way. And if you're asking yourself, but why? I'm going to answer those questions with you in a minute. So let's talk about what actually happens. Okay, so think about the last time that you were nervous or anxious, maybe the last time that you had to present in front of some people on a particular topic, or do something that you maybe weren't really looking forward to. Think about the psychological or the physiological changes that happened, right? You'll notice that you get a really dry mouth. So if you're eating in that state, it means that you've got reduced salivary enzymes that are available for you to break down that food in your mouth. It means that you're going to have reduced carbohydrate, fat, and protein digestion. So that's just going to sit there, and it's not going to feel that great, okay? And as I mentioned, right, you've got that reduced blood flow to the gut, and you need blood flow to deliver oxygen to allow that digestion to happen. And if you don't have that, that food just sits there and makes you feel pretty blah. All right. So how are you eating? What are you doing when you're eating, and what state are you in? So what I want to explain here is eating under sympathetic or parasympathetic dominance. Okay, so just to make this all make sense, have you ever been to France? And if you have, I hope you enjoyed all the wine, cheese, bread, and everything else delicious about French cuisine. And I guess if you haven't been to France, I haven't been to France, but I have been to Malta and to Italy. So there's some similarities there. At least if you've been to really anywhere in the Mediterranean, but particularly France, at least if you haven't been there, you'll have an appreciation for French culture, right? And you'll have some idea about how the French do things when it comes to food. And there are a few differences in how they eat. Firstly, they take a couple of hours, not an hour, not half an hour, hours for lunch. Okay, and they have their largest meal at midday, which is great for your metabolic peak, but I'll have to save that for another day just in the interest of time. Okay, they also have generous amounts of wine with their meals. Okay, so girls, just Women, Wine, Wealth girls, let's just disclaim this. I'm not condoning large amounts of wine, but I will say that wine does help you to get into this state of parasympathetic dominance, okay? So just hear me out and don't mishear me what I'm saying, because I talked last week about wine being good for gut health and the polyphenols. So let's not get excited too quickly, all right? So whenever my husband decides that he wants to, or he's claiming ignorance, that I didn't tell him something, he'll say that, or I misheard him, he'll say that I heard him wrong. So don't hear me wrong here, okay? So coming back to the French, right? So they have lots of cheese and high-fat foods. They also tend to have smaller portions, but they take longer to eat it. And remember that book, French Women Don't Get Fat? Well, this is one of the reasons why, because they have small portions, but slowly, and they enjoy them. And they're also really meticulous about fresh foods and high quality ingredients. They genuinely care about where their food comes from and what goes into their food. And, you know, there's a few other things that French people do that aren't particularly conducive to good health, right? They smoke more, they exercise much less, but what they do is they celebrate every meal. And every meal is an occasion, and they put in, it's all around good food, good company, and good wine. They weigh less on average, which is quite interesting, and they have fewer health issues, with cholesterol and blood pressure being very low in the French population, despite some pretty counterintuitive habits, right? And you'll probably be thinking, there's not too many similarities between what the French do and what we do, and therein lies the problem. All right, so we have a very, very different approach to food. And remember, a dietitian's take on stress is a lot of it going to come down to food, right? So it can be hard to even take, whether it's even if it's half an hour just to take time for lunch. We're constantly preoccupied. We've got lots going on. We're eating distracted. Especially with a lot of us having to work from home, in this kind of new age that we're living in. So, there's that constant, there's not a really defined space where we eat and we sort of switch off from everything else. Dinners are often rushed, breakfasts tend to be rushed, and we eat our larger meal at the end of the day, which of course, for those of you who've heard me speak around metabolic peaks, it's not the ideal time to have your main meal. So let's talk a little bit about how we can get this right and how it can contribute to a healthier metabolism. And I know I think it was week 1, we spoke about our brain in relation to appetite and hunger, but I want to turn our attention now to how the different systems work within the brain around basically managing our body, okay? And so we want to talk a little bit about the sympathetic nervous system. So this system is essentially responsible for switching our stress response response on and switching off digestion. So the way I think about it is it sympathizes with our suggestion, right? So it's like, oh, I know what you want to do. I know you're really stressed, so I'm going to go with you here. So it's like kind of sympathetic to our stress. That's how I remember it. Now, the parasympathetic is the opposite to this, okay? So it's responsible for switching our stress response. Our parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for switching our stress response off and turning up digestion. Okay, so it's confusing even for me. But parasympathetic, I just think, breathe out. I have no good way to remember that. I just thought sympathetic, parasympathetic. That's just how it is, right? So now when our French counterparts take a few hours for lunch, it's a really nice, long, leisurely pace. Obviously, they're drinking some wine, and obviously that's registering in their pleasure center, which, guess what, switches on what we call their eating under parasympathetic dominance, okay? So they eat in a very relaxed state, where eating is not about business, it's not about getting nutrients in, it's all about pleasure. And that eating is something to be enjoyed. So as a culture, they place a really high value, not just on eating a meal, but really eating for nourishment and enjoyment and for pleasure.